My daughter-in-law made me sleep in the garage for 3 years, while she and my son lived in my own house. She told everyone I was senile, that I had lost my mind, that keeping me in the garage was for my own safety. But last Tuesday, when she opened that garage door expecting to find a broken old woman, she found something else entirely. She found the truth. And trust me, what happened next destroyed everything she had built on my silence. Let me tell you how I got here. Let me tell you who I really am. My name is Rosalind, and I am 63 years old. For 41 years, I worked as a senior accountant at one of the largest investment firms in Chicago. I managed portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I signed off on transactions that could make or break entire companies. I was trusted with secrets that powerful men would kill to protect. But none of that mattered to my son Damien or his wife Priscilla. To them, I was just the old woman who had outlived her usefulness. The house they kept me in, the one with the garage that became my prison, I bought it 32 years ago with money I saved working double shifts for an entire decade. I raised Damien in that house. I cooked his meals in that kitchen. I helped him with his homework at that dining room table. I watched him graduate from high school through the window of that living room because I had to work that day and could only see the ceremony through the reflection of my neighbor's television. Every brick, every tile, every inch of that property was soaked in my sacrifice. But 3 years ago, everything changed. Damien had married Priscilla 2 years before that, a woman 15 years younger than him, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I tried to like her. I really did. I invited her to Sunday dinners. I complimented her cooking, even when it was bland. I pretended not to notice when she rolled her eyes at my stories, or when she whispered to Damien that I talked too much about the past. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Wednesday afternoon in November. I remember it was Wednesday because I always did my grocery shopping on Wednesdays, and I had just come back with bags full of ingredients for Thanksgiving dinner. Priscilla was sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of her. Damien was standing behind her with his arms crossed, looking at the floor like he always did when he was about to disappoint me. "Mom," he said without meeting my eyes, "we need to talk about your living situation." "My living situation," I repeated, setting down the grocery bags. "I live here. This is my house." Priscilla smiled that cold smile of hers. "Of course it is, Rosalind. That is not what we are saying. We are just concerned about you, that is all. You have been forgetting things lately. You left the stove on last week. You forgot to lock the front door twice this month. We are worried that you might hurt yourself." I had not left the stove on. I had not forgotten to lock the door. But I did not say that because I was too stunned by what came next. "We think it would be best if you moved into the garage," Damien said, still not looking at me. "We have converted it into a small apartment. You will have your own space, your own bathroom. You will be more comfortable there." The garage. My son wanted me to live in the garage of my own house, a space that was barely insulated, that leaked when it rained, that had housed my late husband's old car and boxes of forgotten memories. That was where they thought I belonged. I should have said no. I should have screamed at them to get out of my house. I should have called a lawyer right then and there. But I looked at my son, at the boy I had sacrificed everything for, and I saw something in his eyes that broke me. I saw shame. Not shame for what he was asking me to do, but shame of me. He was ashamed of his own mother. So I agreed. I agreed because I thought it was temporary. I agreed because I thought that once they saw I was not senile, once they realized I was still capable and sharp, they would let me back into my own home. I agreed because I loved my son more than I loved myself. That was my first mistake. Before I continue, if you have ever been pushed aside by the people you love most, if you have ever discovered a painful truth too late, make sure you are subscribed. Some stories are meant to be witnessed by those who understand. The garage had been minimally converted. There was a small bed in the corner, the kind you would find in a cheap motel. A portable heater that wheezed more than it warmed. A tiny bathroom that had been hastily installed with a toilet that never flushed properly, and a shower that only ran cold water half the time. The walls were still concrete, still gray, still echoing with the ghosts of oil stains and forgotten tools. Priscilla presented it to me as if she were showing off a luxury suite. "Look, Rosalind," she said with that performative sweetness she used when Damien was watching. "We even hung some curtains. And here is a small refrigerator so you can keep snacks. Is it not cozy?" Cozy. A garage is not cozy. A garage is where you park your car. A garage is where you store things you do not want inside your house. And now, a garage was where my son and his wife stored me. The first week was bearable. I told myself it was an adventure, a change of scenery. I kept busy reading books I had brought from my room. I did crossword puzzles. I listened to the radio. I pretended I was on some sort of strange vacation, and that soon I would go back to my real life. But then the rules started. Priscilla would knock on the garage door every morning at exactly 7 o'clock. She would hand me a list of chores through a crack in the door, never fully opening it, never inviting me inside. "Today you will do the laundry. Today you will clean the bathrooms. Today you will prepare dinner and leave it on the stove before 6, then go back to your room." My room. That is what she called the garage now. My room. As if giving it a different name would change what it was. I did the chores without complaint. I cooked their meals. I cleaned their messes. I washed their clothes. I did everything they asked because I kept believing that if I was good enough, if I was useful enough, they would see that I was not the burden they thought I was. Months passed. Winter turned to spring, turned to summer. I watched the seasons change through the small window of the garage, the same window where I used to see my husband working on his car, the same window where I used to watch Damien play basketball as a teenager. Now I watch strangers walk by, people living their lives while I existed in a concrete box. The isolation was the hardest part. Priscilla had taken my phone during the first month. She said it was for my own good, that I had been making too many calls and confusing people with my rambling. I had not been rambling. I had been calling my old friends from work, my sister in Florida, anyone who would listen. But now those connections were severed. I was alone with nothing but my thoughts and the humming of that useless portable heater. I started keeping a journal, not because I thought anyone would ever read it, but because I needed proof that I was still alive, still thinking, still human. I wrote down everything. Every meal I was given, which was usually leftovers or expired food from their refrigerator. Every chore I was assigned. Every time Priscilla spoke to me through the door without opening it. Every time Damien walked past the garage without looking in. The journal became my sanity. It became the thread that kept me tethered to reality when everything else was trying to convince me I was crazy. Because that was the worst part of it all, the gaslighting. Priscilla had perfected it to an art form. When I complained about the cold, she would say, "What do you mean, Rosalind? We turned the heat up just yesterday." When I mentioned that the food was expired, she would shake her head sadly and tell Damien, "See, this is what I mean. She does not remember anything." When I asked to come inside the house for just one dinner, just one holiday, she would look at me with those empty eyes and say, "Rosalind, do you not remember what happened last time? You had one of your episodes and we had to call a doctor." I never had episodes. There was never a doctor. But she said it so confidently, so matter-of-factly, that sometimes even I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe I had done things I did not remember. Maybe the garage was where I deserved to be. That is how manipulation works. It does not attack you head on. It seeps in slowly, like water through cracks in a foundation, until one day you look around and realize the whole structure of your self-belief has crumbled. By the end of the first year, I had stopped fighting. I had stopped asking to come inside. I had stopped hoping that Damien would wake up one day and remember that I was his mother, that I had given him everything, that I deserved better than this concrete prison. I had become exactly what they wanted me to be, invisible. But something changed in the second year, something that would eventually set everything else in motion. It was a Thursday in March, one of those days where winter refuses to let go and the sky hangs low and gray like a dirty blanket. I was doing laundry in the house, one of the few times I was allowed inside, when I heard Priscilla on the phone in the other room. She did not know I was there because she thought I was still in the garage, but the washing machine had broken and I had to use the one in the basement. I heard her laughing in that high-pitched way she did when she was being fake. "Oh, Patricia, you would not believe it," she was saying. "The old bat is completely out of it now. She does not even remember what day it is half the time. Damien and I are just waiting for her to kick the bucket so we can sell this dump and buy that condo in Florida." My blood turned to ice in my veins. I stood there, frozen, with a basket of dirty clothes in my hands, listening to my daughter-in-law discuss my death as casually as if she were talking about the weather. "And the best part," Priscilla continued, "she signed the house over to Damien last month. She does not even know she did it. We just told her it was some paperwork for her pension, and she signed right on the dotted line. She is so far gone, she would sign her own death certificate if we asked her to." The laundry basket slipped from my hands. The sound must have carried because Priscilla suddenly went quiet. Then I heard her footsteps approaching. "Rosalind," she said when she saw me standing there, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. Fear that I had heard too much. "How long have you been there?" I did not answer. I could not answer. Because I was remembering that day 3 weeks ago when Damien had brought me a stack of papers and a pen. "Just sign here, Mom," he had said in that bored tone he always used with me now. "It is for your pension. They need your signature every year." I had not read the papers. I had trusted my son. I had signed away my own home without knowing it. Priscilla recovered quickly, her face smoothed into that familiar mask of concern. "Rosalind, you look pale. Are you having another one of your episodes? Let me help you back to your room." She reached for my arm, but I pulled away. For the first time in over a year, I pulled away. "I know what you did," I said, and my voice sounded strange to me, stronger than it had in months. "I know what you both did." Priscilla's eyes hardened. "I do not know what you think you heard, Rosalind, but you are clearly confused. You need to rest. I will bring you some tea." She did not bring me tea. She brought Damien, and they both stood in my garage that night with matching expressions of cold calculation. "Mom," Damien said, and hearing him call me that word while planning my destruction was perhaps the cruelest thing of all. "Priscilla told me you had an episode today. She said you were hearing things, imagining conversation." "I was not imagining anything," I said. "I heard her on the phone. I heard everything. You tricked me into signing over my house." Damien exchanged a look with Priscilla. "See," he said, shaking his head with fake sadness. "This is exactly what we were worried about, these paranoid delusions." "They are not delusions, Mom." He stepped closer to me, and in that moment he looked so much like his father that my heart cracked a little more. "You are not well. You have not been well for a long time. We are only trying to help you." I looked at my son, at the child I had rocked to sleep, at the teenager I had driven to practice, at the man I had watched marry a woman who was now plotting my ruin. And I realized something that I should have understood a long time ago. He was never going to choose me. He had already made his choice, and it was not his mother. That night, alone in the garage with the wind howling outside and the portable heater barely keeping the chill at bay, I made a decision. I was done being a victim. I was done being the crazy old woman they wanted me to be. I was going to fight back. But I was not going to fight with anger or accusations. I had tried that, and it had gotten me nowhere. No, I was going to fight with something far more powerful: patience. The next morning, I changed my approach completely. When Priscilla knocked on the garage door with my list of chores, I smiled and took it without comment. When she handed me expired food for lunch, I thanked her politely. When she spoke to me through the door instead of opening it, I responded with gentle understanding. "Thank you, Priscilla," I would say. "You are so good to take care of me." She was confused at first. I could see it in the slight furrow of her brow, the way she hesitated before closing the door. But eventually she accepted it. She thought she had broken me completely. She thought I had finally surrendered to the role they had created for me. She was wrong. While they thought I was declining, I was actually preparing. Every day I did my chores exactly as they asked, but I also did something else. I watched. I listened. I gathered information like I used to gather financial data at the firm. I took mental notes of every conversation I overheard, every visitor who came to the house, every phone call Priscilla made when she thought I could not hear. I learned that Priscilla had a sister named Margot, who lived in California, and who she was constantly trying to impress. I learned that Damien was having problems at work, that his boss had put him on a performance improvement plan. I learned that they were not as financially stable as they pretended to be, that the condo in Florida was a dream they could only afford if they sold my house quickly. I also learned something else, something that would become crucial later. Priscilla's father, a man named Theodore, was dying of cancer in a nursing home on the other side of town. She never visited him, but she talked about him constantly, always with that mix of obligation and resentment that children sometimes have for aging parents. "She is going to inherit everything," Priscilla told Damien one night when she thought I could not hear. "The house, the savings, his stock portfolio. My mother left it all to him, and when he dies, it all comes to me. We just need to wait a little longer." Priscilla and I were more alike than she knew. We were both waiting for our inheritance. The difference was that mine had already been stolen. Months passed. I continued my act of docile acceptance while secretly building my case. I found a pen that Damien had dropped in the garage, and I wrote everything down in my journal, dates and times and conversations, creating a paper trail of their abuse that I hid beneath a loose floorboard. I also started exercising in secret, doing stretches and walks around the garage when no one was watching. I needed to be strong for what was coming. I needed to be ready. The opportunity I was waiting for came in the form of an unexpected visitor. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the day that would change everything. I was in the garage as always when I heard a car pull into the driveway. This was unusual because Damien and Priscilla rarely had guests. They had carefully isolated me from the outside world, and that meant limiting their own social interactions as well. I peeked through my small window and saw an older woman getting out of a silver sedan. She was dressed elegantly, in a tailored coat and leather gloves, and she walked toward the front door with the confidence of someone who belonged. I heard the doorbell ring, then Priscilla's voice, high and nervous. "Aunt Delphine, what are you doing here? I was not expecting you." Aunt Delphine. I had heard that name before. She was Priscilla's aunt on her mother's side, a woman who lived in Boston and who Priscilla both admired and feared. From the conversations I had overheard, Delphine was wealthy, unmarried, and notorious for her sharp tongue and sharper observations. "I am in town for business," I heard Delphine say. "I thought I would stop by and see how my favorite niece is doing, and meet this mother-in-law I have heard so much about." My heart stopped. She wanted to meet me. Through the thin walls of the garage, I heard the conversation continue. Priscilla's voice was strained, making excuses. Rosalind is not feeling well today, she was saying. She has been having one of her episodes. It is really better if we do not disturb her. Nonsense, Delphine said. I have come all this way. The least you can do is introduce me. There was a long pause. Then I heard footsteps approaching the garage. The door opened, and there stood Priscilla, her face pale with barely concealed panic. Behind her was Delphine, a tall woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. Rosalind, Priscilla said in that falsely sweet voice, this is my Aunt Delphine. She wanted to say hello. I stood up from my bed, aware of how I must look in this concrete room with its bare walls and minimal furniture. But I also saw something in Delphine's eyes, something that told me this woman was not like her niece. It is a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Delphine, I said, extending my hand. Delphine took it, but she was not looking at me. She was looking around the garage, taking in the portable heater, the tiny bathroom, the bed that looked more like a cot. This is where you live, she said, and it was not a question. Priscilla jumped in immediately. We converted the garage into a small apartment for her. She prefers it, actually, more independence. Delphine's eyes narrowed. Independence. She turned to me. Is that true, Rosalind? Do you prefer living in a garage? This was my moment. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment when I could finally tell someone the truth. But I hesitated. Because I knew Priscilla was watching. And I knew that if I said the wrong thing, there would be consequences. Priscilla had made that clear many times before. Then I thought about all those months in the cold. I thought about the expired food and the broken toilet and the way my own son walked past my window without looking in. I thought about the house I had bought with 41 years of work being stolen from me with a forged signature. No, I said quietly. I do not prefer it. I was tricked into living here. They told me it would be temporary, but that was 3 years ago. They took my phone so I could not call anyone. They made me do all the housework. And last year they tricked me into signing over my own house. Priscilla's face went white. Rosalind, she said sharply, you are confused. You are having one of your episodes. I am not confused, I said, and my voice was steady for the first time in years. I heard you on the phone 6 months ago. You said you were waiting for me to die so you could sell the house and move to Florida. Delphine had not moved throughout this exchange. She stood in the doorway of the garage like a judge presiding over a trial, her eyes moving between me and her niece. Priscilla, she said finally, her voice cold, is any of this true? Of course not, Priscilla sputtered. She is senile. She imagines things. Ask Damien. I will ask Damien, Delphine said. But first, I would like to see some documentation. If Rosalind signed over her house, there should be legal paperwork. That is private, Priscilla said quickly. Family business. I am family, Delphine replied. Show me the papers. What happened next was something I will remember for the rest of my life. Priscilla stood there, caught between her aunt's demand and her own deception, and I watched the mask she had worn for years finally begin to crack. Aunt Delphine, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, you do not understand. Rosalind is dangerous. She has violent episodes. We have had to call doctors multiple times. We keep her in the garage for everyone's safety. Delphine looked at me, at my thin frame and my weathered hands, at my gray hair that had not been properly styled in years. This woman is dangerous, she said flatly. Yes. She does not look dangerous to me. She looks neglected. That word, neglected, hung in the air like a verdict. Priscilla opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I am going to make some calls, Delphine said. She pulled out her phone and began dialing. Until I know exactly what is going on here, no one leaves this house. Priscilla tried to stop her, tried to grab the phone, but Delphine stepped back smoothly. I would not do that if I were you, she said. I have a very good lawyer and an even better memory. The next few hours were a blur. Delphine called the police, then an attorney, then a social worker. Each person who arrived looked at the garage, at the conditions I had been living in, at the thin layer of frost still clinging to the inside of the window, and I could see their expressions shift from professional neutrality to barely concealed horror. Damien came home in the middle of it all. He walked into a house full of strangers asking questions about his mother, and for the first time since I had known him, he looked truly afraid. "Mom," he said, and the words sounded hollow now. "What did you tell them?" "The truth," I said. The investigation took weeks. The social worker documented everything, from the inadequate heating to the expired food to the lack of any proper medical care during my 3 years in the garage. The attorney Delphine had called, reviewed the paperwork I had signed, and confirmed what I already knew, that it was a deed transfer, that my son now legally owned my house, that I had been manipulated into giving away my entire life's work. But there was also something else, something I had not expected. During the investigation, the authorities discovered that this was not the first time Damien and Priscilla had done something like this. 5 years before they came to live with me, they had been under investigation in another state for financial exploitation of Priscilla's grandmother. The case had been dropped due to lack of evidence, but the pattern was clear. They were predators, and I had been their prey. The house transfer was eventually reversed due to evidence of fraud and undue influence. The attorney argued that I had been in a vulnerable state, isolated and psychologically manipulated when I signed those papers. The judge agreed. But legal victory was only part of it. What I really wanted was something no court could give me. I wanted my son to understand what he had done. We had that conversation 3 weeks after I moved back into my house, with its familiar walls and its kitchen where I had cooked 1,000 meals, and its living room where I had watched Damien take his first steps. He came to see me alone, without Priscilla, which was the first time that had happened in years. He sat across from me at the dining room table, the same table where he used to do his homework, the same table where I had served him breakfast every morning for 18 years. He looked older than I remembered, tired and somehow smaller. "Mom," he said, "I do not know how to explain." "Then do not," I said. "Do not explain. Just tell me one thing. Did you ever love me, or was I always just a resource to be used?" He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I loved you," he said. "When I was young, I loved you. But then you were always working, always gone. And when you were home, you were tired, distracted. I felt like I was raising myself sometimes. And Priscilla, she made me feel like someone was finally putting me first." "So you put her first," I said, "over your own mother, over basic human decency. I did not know it would go this far." "You knew," I said, and I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "You knew from the very first day you asked me to move into the garage. You just did not care." He did not deny it. He could not deny it. We both knew the truth. "I want you to leave now," I said. "And I want you to know that I am not doing this out of anger. I am doing it out of self-respect. You and Priscilla made your choices. Now I am making mine. Mom, please leave." He stood up slowly, like a man twice his age. At the door, he turned back to look at me. "Will I ever see you again?" he asked. "I do not know," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, when you have become the person I raised you to be. But I am not holding my breath." He left. The door closed behind him with a sound that felt final, like the last page of a book being turned. I sat at that table for a long time afterward, thinking about everything that had happened, about the years I had spent working to give my son a better life, about the way he had repaid that sacrifice with betrayal, about the garage and the cold and the endless days of loneliness. But I also thought about Delphine, who had seen through Priscilla's lies in minutes when I had been fooled for years. About Clarice, the social worker who had held my hand when I gave my statement. About all the people who had shown me kindness when my own family had shown me cruelty. The world is not all darkness. There are still people who see you, who believe you, who fight for you when you cannot fight for yourself. I had forgotten that during my years in the garage. I would not forget it again. Have you ever had to rebuild your life from the ashes of someone else's betrayal? Have you ever had to learn that the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones who hurt you most? If you have, I want you to know something. You are not alone, and it is never too late to reclaim your story. The months after Damien left were both the hardest and the most healing of my life. I had to learn how to live alone again, truly alone, without even the toxic presence of family to fill the silence. Some days were unbearable. Some days I woke up and had to remind myself that I was allowed to eat in my own kitchen, allowed to sleep in my own bed, allowed to exist in my own home without asking permission. But slowly, day by day, I began to remember who I was before the garage. I was Rosalind, senior accountant. I was Rosalind, homeowner. I was Rosalind, survivor. I reconnected with old friends from work, the ones I had been forbidden from calling during my years of isolation. They were shocked to hear what had happened to me, shocked and then furious on my behalf. Several of them offered to testify if the case ever went to criminal trial. I also started seeing a therapist, a gentle woman named Dr. Beatrice, who specialized in elder abuse. She helped me understand that what had happened was not my fault, that predators like Priscilla specifically target people who love too much, who trust too easily, who cannot imagine that their own family would hurt them. You are not weak for being deceived, she told me during one of our sessions. You are strong for surviving, and you are stronger still for speaking up. Speaking up, that became my mission in the months that followed. I started volunteering at a local senior center, sharing my story with other older adults, warning them about the signs of financial exploitation and family abuse. Some of them listened. Some of them were going through the same thing I had been through and just did not know how to escape. I helped 3 women leave abusive living situations in the first year. 3 women who might have spent the rest of their lives in their own versions of my garage if someone had not shown them that there was another way. The legal case against Damien and Priscilla took nearly 2 years to work its way through the system. The charges were serious: financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, fraud, falsification of documents. Their attorneys tried everything, claiming I was confused, that I had consented to all of it, that the garage was a luxury apartment and not a prison. But the evidence was overwhelming. My journal, the one I had hidden beneath the loose floorboard, documented everything. The photographs the social worker had taken showed conditions that no reasonable person could defend. And the testimony of Delphine, who had seen the garage for herself and heard Priscilla's lies firsthand, was devastating. In the end, Priscilla was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Damien, who cooperated with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence, received 3 years of probation and mandatory counseling. I did not attend the sentencing. I did not need to. By then, I had already moved on with my life. What I learned from those 3 years in the garage is something I will carry with me forever. I learned that the people who are supposed to love you the most can also hurt you the most. I learned that silence is not peace, it is surrender. I learned that asking for help is not weakness, it is the bravest thing a person can do. But most importantly, I learned that it is never too late to reclaim your life. No matter how old you are, no matter how broken you feel, no matter how long you have been in your own personal garage, there is always a door. And on the other side of that door is the rest of your life. 1 year after the trial ended, I received a letter. The envelope was plain, the handwriting unfamiliar. Inside was a single page. Dear Rosalind, you do not know me, but I know you. I was in the courtroom during your son's trial. I heard your testimony. I heard what you survived. I am writing to tell you that your story saved my life. I have been living in my daughter's basement for 4 years, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, eating whatever scraps she decides to give me. I thought I deserved it. I thought I was a burden. But hearing you speak, hearing you say that you were not confused, that you were not crazy, that you were a victim of people who should have protected you, something changed in me. I realized I was not alone. I moved out of my daughter's house last month. I am living in a small apartment now, nothing fancy, but it is mine. I am learning how to be myself again. Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for showing me that it is never too late. Sincerely, a woman who finally found the door. I read that letter 100 times. I read it until the paper was soft and the ink was faded. And every time I read it, I was reminded of why I told my story, why I continue to tell it. Because somewhere out there, in a garage or a basement or an attic or a closet, there is another woman like me. Another woman who has been told she is crazy, who has been isolated from everyone who loves her, who has been convinced that she deserves to be treated like a ghost in her own life. And maybe if she hears my story, she will find the courage to open her own door. Today, I am 67 years old. I live alone in the house I bought 36 years ago, the house that was stolen from me and then returned. I wake up every morning in my own bed. I make my own breakfast in my own kitchen. I sit on my own porch and watch the seasons change through my own windows. I do not have a relationship with my son anymore. That is a loss I have learned to carry, a grief that will probably never fully heal. But I have also learned that some doors need to stay closed, that some relationships are too broken to be repaired, that love cannot exist without respect. Damien reached out to me once, about a year after his probation ended. He wanted to meet for coffee, he said. He wanted to apologize properly. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about the boy he used to be, the man he became, the mother I tried to be. And then I wrote him a letter. Dear Damien, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I do. Carrying anger is like carrying a stone, and I have carried enough weight in my life. But forgiveness is not reconciliation. I cannot have a relationship with someone who saw me as something to be used and discarded. I cannot trust someone who chose comfort over conscience. I hope you find peace. I hope you become the person you were meant to be, but I cannot be part of that journey. Take care of yourself, Mom. I never heard back from him. I do not know if I ever will. But I do know this. My story did not end in a garage. My story did not end with signing papers I did not understand. My story did not end with cold nights and expired food, and the sound of my son's footsteps walking past without stopping. My story ended here, in this house, in this life, in this moment of peace I fought so hard to find. And if you are still listening, if you have made it this far, I want you to know something. Your story does not have to end in your garage either. Whatever concrete box they have put you in, whatever lies they have told you about yourself, whatever pieces of your dignity they have stolen, it is not too late. Find your door, open it, and walk through. The last thing I want to tell you is about a moment that happened last spring. I was sitting on my porch, the same porch where I used to watch Damien play basketball, when a woman walked up the sidewalk. She was about my age, maybe a little younger, with gray hair and nervous hands. "Are you Rosalind?" she asked. "I am." "I read about you," she said, "in that article about elder abuse. I recognized your house from the photos." I invited her to sit down. She told me her name was Constance, and she was going through something similar with her own son and daughter-in-law. They had not put her in a garage yet, but they had taken control of her finances. They had isolated her from her friends. They had convinced her that she was becoming forgetful and needed supervision. "I do not know what to do," she said, and her voice was shaking. "He is my son. I love him." "I know," I said. "I loved mine too." We talked for 3 hours that afternoon. I told her my story, all of it, the good parts and the bad parts and the parts that still kept me up at night. I told her about the journal, about Delphine, about the social worker who had believed me when no one else would. And then I told her the most important thing, the thing I wish someone had told me years ago. "You are not crazy," I said. "You are not forgetful. You are not a burden. You are a human being who deserves to be treated with dignity, and there are people who will help you if you let them." She left that day with phone numbers, resources, a plan. I do not know what happened to her. I do not know if she found her own door, but I hope she did. That is all any of us can do in the end. We tell our stories. We reach out our hands. We hope that someone grabs hold. They kept me in a garage for 3 years. They stole my house. They tried to steal my mind. But in the end, they could not steal my truth. And now that truth belongs to everyone who needs it. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own struggles or gave you hope for your own future, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the most powerful thing we can do for each other is remind each other that we are not alone. My name is Rosalind. I am 67 years old, and I am finally, truly, irrevocably free. The seasons continue to change outside my window. Spring arrives with its stubborn crocuses pushing through the frozen ground, and I think about resilience. Summer brings long evenings on the porch, and I think about time reclaimed. Fall paints the trees in colors I forgot existed during those gray garage years, and I think about transformation. Winter settles its quiet blanket over everything, and I think about rest, earned rest, peaceful rest. I have learned to cook again, not for someone else's approval, but for my own pleasure. I make elaborate Sunday dinners even though I am the only one eating them. Roasted chicken with rosemary, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans sautéed in butter. I set the table properly, with real plates and cloth napkins, because I spent 3 years eating expired food on a paper towel, and I will never take a proper meal for granted again. I have learned to travel. Small trips at first, just to the next town over, then to Chicago to visit old colleagues, then to places I had only read about in magazines. Last year, I spent 2 weeks in Italy, walking the streets of Florence, eating pasta in Rome, watching the sunset over the canals of Venice. I was 70 years old, and I was seeing the world for the first time, really seeing it, with eyes that had been closed for too long. I have learned to laugh again. Not the nervous, appeasing laugh I used during those terrible years, the laugh that said, "Please do not hurt me," the laugh that tried to make myself smaller. No, this is a real laugh, a full laugh, a laugh that comes from somewhere deep in my chest and fills the whole room. I have learned to say no. Such a small word, such a powerful word. No, I do not want to do that. No, I do not agree with that. No, you cannot treat me that way. Every no I speak is a tiny act of revolution, a reclamation of the voice they tried to silence. And I have learned to say yes. Yes to new friendships. Yes to unexpected adventures. Yes to the second act of my life that I thought had been taken from me. Yes to the volunteer work that brings me into contact with other survivors. Yes to the speaking engagements where I tell my story to rooms full of social workers and lawyers and advocates. Yes to every opportunity to turn my pain into someone else's protection. 2 years ago, I received an invitation that changed everything. A national organization focused on elder abuse prevention asked me to join their board of directors. They had read about my case, they said. They had seen the impact of my advocacy work. They wanted me to help shape policy at a national level. I almost said no. I almost said I was too old, too tired, too damaged by what I had been through. But then I thought about all the women still living in their garages, still eating expired food, still believing the lies their families told them about their own minds. I said yes. Now I spend my days fighting for protections I never had. Laws that require documentation when elderly adults transfer property. Training programs that teach bank tellers to recognize signs of financial exploitation. Awareness campaigns that help families understand the difference between caregiving and control. It is not glamorous work. There are days when the bureaucracy feels impossible, when the progress feels too slow, when I wonder if anything I do really makes a difference. But then I get another letter from another woman who found her door. And I remember why I keep going. The last time I saw Damien was at a distance, across a crowded grocery store 3 months ago. He looked older than I remembered, his hair graying at the temples, lines around his eyes that had not been there before. He was with a woman I did not recognize, not Priscilla, someone new. He saw me too. I know he did, because he stopped in the middle of the aisle, a box of cereal in his hand, and stared at me with an expression I could not read. Regret, maybe. Shame, possibly. Or perhaps just the discomfort of being confronted with the physical evidence of his failures. I did not approach him. I did not wave or smile or pretend that everything was fine between us. I simply held his gaze for a long moment, acknowledging that we had seen each other, acknowledging that we both remembered what had happened, and then I turned and walked away. That was the extent of our reunion. A grocery store, a box of cereal, a silence that said everything words could not. I do not know if Damien has changed. I do not know if the counseling he was required to complete actually made an impact. I do not know if he lies awake at night thinking about his mother in that garage, or if he has convinced himself that it was not really that bad, that I was exaggerating, that he was just trying to help. What I know is that I cannot carry his redemption for him. I cannot fix what is broken in him. I cannot be the mother who sacrifices herself on the altar of her son's potential. I tried that once. It nearly destroyed me. So I have made my peace with the uncertainty. I have accepted that some questions will never be answered. Some relationships will never be healed. Some chapters will never have satisfying conclusions. And I have learned that peace is not the absence of unresolved things. Peace is the presence of acceptance. My therapist, Dr. Beatrice, retired last year. At our final session, she gave me something, a small wooden box that she said she gave to all her patients who completed their work with her. "What is inside?" I asked. "Open it and see." I lifted the lid. Inside the box was a small mirror. "I do not understand," I said. She smiled. "Every time you doubt yourself, every time you wonder if you are worthy of the life you have built, every time you feel like that scared woman in the garage again, I want you to look in this mirror. I want you to see the face of someone who survived, someone who spoke up, someone who turned her worst experience into a mission to help others. I want you to see yourself clearly, Rosalind, not through the distorted lens of people who wanted to diminish you, but through your own eyes." I keep that mirror on my nightstand now. I look at it every morning when I wake up and every night before I go to sleep. And every time I do, I see someone I am proud to be. If you are still with me, if you have listened this long, I want to leave you with one final thought. The story I have told you is not unique. It happens every day to women and men and elders all over this country. It happens in fancy houses and modest apartments. It happens to people with money and people without. It happens in every community, every background, every family structure. And it will keep happening until we all decide to do something about it. So I am asking you, not for myself, but for all the people who cannot ask yet. If you see something, say something. If you suspect a neighbor or a friend or a family member is being mistreated, do not assume someone else will handle it. Do not convince yourself it is not your business. Do not look the other way because confrontation is uncomfortable. Because for 3 years, people looked the other way for me. Neighbors who must have noticed I never left the house. Delivery drivers who must have wondered why an old woman was living in a garage. Friends and colleagues who must have thought it strange that I had disappeared from their lives so completely. Any one of them could have asked a question. Any one of them could have made a phone call. Any one of them could have been my Delphine. Be someone's Delphine. That is all I ask. The sun is setting now outside my window, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It is the same sunset I watched through the dirty window of my garage, back when I thought I would never be free. But now I am watching it from my living room, in a house that is truly mine, with a heart that has finally stopped waiting for permission to beat. They kept me in a garage for 3 years. They tried to convince me I was nothing. But here I am, still standing, still speaking, still fighting for every woman who has not found her voice yet. My name is Rosalind. I am a survivor, and my door is finally, permanently, beautifully open. If this story meant something to you, like and share it with someone who needs to hear it, because every voice that speaks up makes it easier for the next one. And together, we can ensure that no one ever has to live in a garage again. This is my story, but it could be anyone's story. It could be your neighbor's story, your coworker's story, your mother's story. Please, pay attention. Ask the questions no one else is asking, and never ever assume that someone's family has their best interests at heart. Because sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones we need protection from. And sometimes, the only way out of the darkness is to let someone else shine a light. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being the kind of person who stays until the end. Now go. Find someone who needs to be found and open a door. There is something else I need to tell you. Something I have not spoken about until now. Something that happened in the final weeks before Delphine arrived. It was a Sunday morning, one of those rare mornings when the garage felt almost warm because the spring sun was hitting the window at just the right angle. I was lying on my cot, staring at the concrete ceiling, counting the cracks the way I did every morning, when I heard something that made my heart stop. It was a child's voice, a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, calling out from somewhere in the backyard. "Grandma," the voice said. "Grandma, where are you?" I sat up so fast I almost fell off the bed. I had not heard that word, grandma, spoken to me in over 3 years. Priscilla had made sure of that, keeping me away from any children in the family, making excuses about why I could not attend holiday gatherings or birthday parties. I went to the window and looked out. There, standing in the middle of my backyard, was a little girl in a yellow dress with dark curly hair and eyes that looked exactly like Damien's had looked when he was young. She was turning in circles, calling out for her grandmother, and I realized with a shock that shook me to my core that this was my granddaughter. This was Damien's daughter. This was a child I did not even know existed. "Grandma," she called again, and then Priscilla's voice cut through the air, sharp and panicked. "Melody, get back here right now. Grandma is not feeling well today. She cannot see you." "But I want to show her my dress," the little girl said. "Mommy, please." "No," Priscilla said, and I watched through the window as she grabbed Melody by the arm and pulled her back toward the house. Grandma is sick. She has to stay in her special room. You cannot bother her. Melody started to cry. She kept looking back at the garage, at the window where I stood watching. And I absolutely knew that she could see me. She could see her grandmother standing in a concrete box, separated from her by walls and lies and years of manipulation. I pressed my hand against the glass. It was all I could do. I could not call out to her because Priscilla would hear. I could not open the door because it was locked from the outside. I could only stand there, my palm against the cold window, watching my granddaughter be carried away from me. That was the moment something broke inside me forever. Not the months of isolation, not the expired food or the cold showers or the endless days of loneliness. It was watching a child I had never held, never kissed, never read stories to, being told that her grandmother was too sick to see her. It was watching another generation learn to forget me. After Delphine came, after the investigation and the trials and the long process of reclaiming my life, I asked about Melody. I learned that she was 5 years old and that she had been born just 6 months after I was moved into the garage. I learned that Priscilla had been pregnant during those first terrible months and had never told me. I learned that my granddaughter had grown up believing I was a sick old woman who lived in a special room because she was too dangerous to be around children. The custody arrangements after Priscilla went to prison were complicated. Damien's probation terms prevented him from having full custody, so Melody went to live with Priscilla's sister Margot in California. The same Margot that Priscilla had always tried to impress, who had apparently believed everything her sister told her about me. I hired a lawyer to fight for visitation rights. It took months, but eventually I was granted supervised visits twice a month. The first time I met Melody properly, in a family court waiting room with the social worker watching our every move, she looked at me with those familiar eyes and asked, "Are you really my grandma?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "I am really your grandma." "Why did you live in the garage?" she asked. "Mommy said it was because you were sick in your head." I knelt down so I was at her eye level. "Do I look sick to you?" I asked. She studied me for a long moment, the way only children can study things, with pure honesty and no pretense. "No," she said finally. "You look like a regular grandma." I smiled. "That is because I am a regular grandma. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Sometimes they tell stories that are not true because they are scared or confused or sad. But I want you to know something, Melody. I have always loved you. Even when I could not see you, even when they kept us apart, I loved you." She reached out and touched my face, her small fingers tracing the lines around my eyes. "Can you read me a story?" she asked. And just like that, sitting in that sterile waiting room with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and a social worker taking notes in the corner, I read my granddaughter her first story. It was a tattered picture book someone had left in the waiting area, something about a bunny who got lost and found his way home. I read it 3 times because she kept asking to hear it again. Now Melody is 8 years old. She lives with Margot during the school year, but she spends summers and holidays with me. She calls me Grandma Rosalind, and she knows the truth about what happened, as much as an 8-year-old can understand such things. She knows that her mother made bad choices. She knows that her father was not brave enough to stop it. She knows that her grandmother fought to find her. And she knows that people can be kept in garages, real ones and metaphorical ones, and that the most important thing in the world is finding someone to open the door. Last Christmas, she made me a card. On the front, she had drawn a picture of a door, a big red door with a golden handle. Inside, in her careful 8-year-old handwriting, she had written, "Dear Grandma Rosalind, thank you for opening doors. I love you forever and ever. Love, Melody." I framed that card. It hangs on my wall now, next to the photograph of my late husband and the degree I earned at 22, and all the other markers of a life fully lived. It is the most valuable thing I own. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Delphine had not come that day. Sometimes I wonder how many more years I would have spent in that garage, watching the seasons change through a dirty window, waiting for a rescue that might never have come. Sometimes I wonder if I would have ever met my granddaughter, or if she would have grown up believing the lies her mother told. But I do not wonder for long, because wondering is just another form of prison, and I have had enough of prisons. What I know is this: I am here. I am alive. I am free. And every day I wake up in my own bed, in my own home, with my own choices stretching out before me, is a day I will not take for granted. Every Sunday dinner I cook is a celebration of survival. Every trip I take is a declaration of independence. Every story I tell is a hand reaching through the darkness, hoping to touch someone who needs to know they are not alone. My name is Rosalind. I spent 3 years in a garage. I lost my son. I found my granddaughter. I discovered reserves of strength I never knew I had. And I am telling you my story because somewhere, right now, in a garage or a basement or an attic, there is another woman waiting to be found. There is another voice waiting to be heard. There is another door waiting to be opened. Maybe you know her. Maybe you are her. Either way, do not wait for a Delphine to appear. Be the Delphine. Make the call. Ask the question. Open the door. Because everyone deserves to stand in their own living room, watching their own sunset, breathing their own free air. Everyone deserves to come home. This is my truth. This is my testimony. This is my gift to anyone who needs to hear it. Go find someone who is lost and bring them home.